Hello and welcome everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our seminar for Tales of the Cocktail 2022. Obviously, we're all thrilled to be back, especially after 2 years of this not being able to be here. And for us, it's really important that we are here today. We're going to be talking about the importance of gender equality within our hospitality industry. Gender equality is spoken about, as we all know, a lot within the industry. But how often do meaningful results occur? So I'm here today with three very inspirational women to share their thoughts and ideas, and as well give an idea of where we are sitting currently in the industry when it comes to gender equality. We're going to discuss the positives of being a woman in this industry, the downsides of it, and what needs to change and why. So to introduce you to this amazing panel of women, we have the lovely Sandrae Lawrence just here. Hi, Sandrae. Sandrae is an amazing publisher and editor of the award-winning Cocktail Lovers magazine and podcast. Also one of the best known people within the bar scene, not just in London and the UK, but also around the world, and has also sat and contributed to many, many panels. So for her to be on this panel with us is absolutely amazing. Next to introduce is the lovely Becky Paskin. Just there on your screen is now waving. Becky is another award-winning drinks journalist and presenter. She is also the founder of Our Whiskey and Our Whiskey Foundation, which gives an amazing platform to women in hospitality with an interest in whiskey as well. Becky again sits on many panels, judges many awards, and again, very lucky to have her with us today. And last but not least, all the way from Hong Kong, Holly Graham. You can see just there. Holly is the brand new author of the Amazing Cocktails in Asia book, which launched earlier this year. It's an amazing book. I'm going to give a shout out to this, Holly. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it in many great bookshops. It launched recently in Hong Kong and very, very exciting. Holly is also the managing editor of Drink Magazine in Asia and an academy chair for 50 Best. Again, like everybody else, Holly sits on many panels, judges many, many competitions, and really, really champions women in the hospitality industry in Asia as well. So obviously we're here today with an amazing panel. Just to very quickly introduce myself as well, my name is Sebastian. I'm going to be hosting this afternoon or morning or evening, wherever you are in the world and watching this. I have a background in luxury hotels, working in places such as the Savoy and the Langham, managing bars and the beverage programs throughout them. I currently work as a consultant, again, back at the Savoy, also working with Adam Handling Restaurant Group and various brands across the drinks industry as well. So very, very honored to be with all these lovely women today, and really excited to kind of really delve a little bit deeper into what gender equality means within the hospitality industry and what we can do to make things better and what the future looks like. So really wanted just to kind of lay the sort of foundations and really talk about what does gender equality mean? How do we define it as well? I always find that this question, a lot of people don't know the answer to this. When you're asking people, what does it mean? A lot of people really stumble with the actual definition. So just to really kind of start from the beginning, when you look at in the dictionary, gender equality means the state in which access to rights or opportunity is unaffected by gender. So very, very sort of simple, but how does that relate to hospitality? And I think really, really good place to start is the first question that I'll put out. And Holly, if you don't mind jumping in there first, is, do you feel that our industry, do you feel that as an industry, we have reached a place where gender equality exists? And obviously I'm asking you, you being based in Hong Kong, it may be very, very different to how it's regarded in the UK or in Europe. So what I'd love to hear your thoughts on, do you feel that we've reached that place of gender equality within hospitality industry?
Yeah, so to rewind a little bit, I think a bit of context about myself might sort of reflect where a lot of my ideas come from. So I was raised by a stay-at-home dad, and my mum was and still is the breadwinner. So, you know, being 35 years old now, like a kid in the 90s, that was still quite unusual to have, you know, a stay-at-home dad. It's still quite unusual now. And for a long, long time, up until maybe my mid to late 20s, I didn't feel that I'd ever encountered issues being a woman, but it wasn't until I joined hospitality, not that it changed my mind in a wrong way, but in a bad way, but I realized that there'd always been problems. Just because I grew up with a very strong female role model doesn't mean that there haven't been problems. And that I think that we're conditioned to a lot of it as well. You know, like as women, we're expected to do certain things and we don't even realize that we're doing these things. And I think that across a lot of Asia, you know, I've lived in Asia for over a decade now, and I've lived in 3 countries, Thailand, Korea, and now Hong Kong. You see that there's still a lot of gender imbalance just in general. You know, like a lot of the societies are very patriarchal still, and even to a point where it's taboo, you know, to bartend. You know, I guess like back in London or most of Europe and the US, it's not a taboo to bartend, but it is here, not even just for women, but for men. Hong Kong is a bit of a different case. I would say that things are a little bit different here because it's a bit more of a, you know, like cultural melting pot, and there's lots of people that, you know, are educated elsewhere, so they come back with different ideas. But I always talk about a story of a young lad that I encountered in Korea. So he's a male bartender, and he'd won a competition, and he said, "I wish my father could see this award because his dad had passed away." And I said, "Why is that?" And he said when he told his dad he wanted to be a bartender, he was kicked out of his house. His dad said, "If you want to be a bartender, you get out. I don't want any son of mine being a bartender." And that was a real, kind of not answering your question, but yes, that like it was a real eye-opener for me, because I'm living in, you know, in a region where it's even still difficult for men to bartend. So we have so much further for women, not just bartending, sorry, in hospitality in general. So, you know, that was a real eye-opener for me. It's like, you know, well, we've got to really advocate for women if men are still struggling as well. But I would say overall in Hong Kong, it's pretty good here. A lot of the time, we would like hours are long in Hong Kong. Like a normal working week is probably about 80 hours. In hospitality, maybe more. And I think that a lot of women are put off by that. Because they don't think they'll get respect or good money and things like that. And we're working really hard to show women that it is an admirable career, and there's so many avenues that it can take you down. So yeah, I think probably like most places, we're making small steps, but I'd rather be making leaps and bounds.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And I think, you know, in different regions and different countries, you know, are very, very different places. So Sandrae, just to go to you, looking at the UK, and Becky, I'm going to come to you more specifically about the whiskey industry in a moment, but just to throw some sort of statistics out there, in the UK, under the age of 30, the industry is made up of 67.7% women, which is great. However, after the age of 30, this drops down to 25.5%, which is a huge drop. So there must be something happening. Sandrae, in your opinion, why do you think that the UK, you know, the bartending hospitality industry is like that in the UK?
I think, you know, going back to what Holly said, probably there is a thing of not just respect in the industry, but I think it's about perhaps women wanting to have children and maybe needing to work different hours. I think it's changing now, because not just men, but women as well are seeing it as a career. I think that before it used to be something that was very much a passing phase. It was in between doing something else. But I think that we'll probably start to see those figures changing as we go along, because it is being valued as a career. And I think that a lot of employers now are starting to take it more seriously and know, particularly after the pandemic actually, that a lot of changes have to be made, not just to attract women into the industry, but men as well. So we're going to see things shifting a lot. And I think that, again, it all centers around the fact that it is being taken seriously as a career. And that is in the UK, you know, somewhere that is really highly regarded for it, and in the US. But I think it's a thing that and too.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, thank you so much.
Did I bore you?
Just cut up a second. No, I think you're completely right, and I think, you know, within this industry, you know, there's so many different sort of sectors, and you know, traditionally it has been a very sort of male-dominated industry, which links, for me, it links very well to, I guess, what we would call sort of male privilege. And just to kind of be really clear, when we talk about male privilege, what it means is a system of advantages or rights that are available to men solely based on their sex. So that could be a man's access to what benefits may vary depending on how close they match their society's ideal masculine norm. So when we talk about male privilege, you know, a lot of the time, again, it's something that we don't really realize. And when people ask, for example, well, what is male privilege? It could be anything from, you know, men will never really have to think about will they get home safely at night. You know, they will never be really questioned about their seat at the table or on a panel or speaking at an event. And Becky, I want to kind of go to you, and you work very closely with the whiskey industry, which again, very, very traditionally male-led. So I just kind of want to hear from you what you've seen the challenges are, maybe some of your own experiences, and what the future looks like for that.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, it's, you know, the whiskey industry has always been perceived as being very male dominated, when, you know, the case is that actually there are thousands of women working within the whiskey industry in all different areas, from the production, from distilling and blending side of things, through to the analytical analysis, the analysis of liquid within labs. There's women working in the marketing departments, PR. There's women who own distilleries, own brands, who are in distribution, not to mention the thousands of women who are bartenders talking about whiskey, brand ambassadors. So when we think of whiskey and how masculine a spirit it is, it's really founded in nothing more than traditional advertising, which was really just aimed at the breadwinners of the house, which was men. It was supposed to be a aspirational spirit that men could aspire to purchase behind the bar, and that would give them some kind of social dominance. But the reality is that women have always been involved in whiskey, even going back to its very earliest days. It was really the women in the kitchens within the large houses, particularly in Scotland, who were actually making the whiskey. So it was women at the very forefront of this spirit in the first place. When we look at the industry now in the modern day, and I think over the last 5 years at least, things have changed dramatically, especially since the beginning of the pandemic. There have been quite a lot of different movements happening that have really pushed the needle when it comes to gender equality within the industry. And there's a lot of eyes on this, as you mentioned at the beginning, Anna, on how we make the industry, not just whiskey, but drinks as a whole, a more inclusive and equitable space. And I use that word equitable for a reason, because we want to lift women, but to the point where we are on an equal footing with men. Now, it's something that's changing, and I'm really excited to see things change, but I do still think that we've got a long way to go. You talked about what that male privilege is, and within whiskey, it's really to be able to stand up in front of an audience and talk about whiskey without your knowledge or authority being questioned. It's being able to stand in a room of consumers, drunk consumers, and usually drunk male consumers, and being able to deliver a tasting without being catcalled or have your appearance be commented on, to be able to conduct a tasting without being touched or harassed or spoken down to. It's being able to do your job and earn the same amount or more than your peers. there is male privilege within not just the whiskey industry, but the drinks industry as a whole. And there are so many barriers and hurdles that women face that men simply just do not. Now, one of the issues that I have really found over the last couple of years, particularly since I focused more on Our Whiskey and the Our Whiskey Foundation, which provides a platform for women in the global whiskey industry. We're here to support, recognise and empower women in whiskey. And something I've really noticed is, while the majority of the industry has really embraced this movement, I still see a lot of pushback from brands who think that this is just a lot of women's guff. It's, oh, we're so bored of the women in whiskey narrative. We don't want to hear this anymore. We're bored of it. But my question is, have you done anything to address it? Like, there's a great analogy. If you see a leak on the floor and you think, oh, I'm so bored of that leak being on the floor. Oh, I wish somebody could just mop it up. It's got nothing to do with me. I wish somebody else would come and deal with it. But no, nobody's going to come and deal with it. You actually have to do something yourself. And I just find it very frustrating working in this industry when sometimes there are voices and prominent voices behind brands and behind bars and some big names in our industry who refuse to acknowledge that there is a gender equality issue within the drinks industry. It's something we all need to do something about, and I know we're going to come to that a little bit later, but just wanted to preface where we are with that.
I think today I just want to point out it's really interesting with talking about whiskey with Father's Day coming up, right? So you see so much targeted advertising for Father's Day, for, you know, great present for Father's Day, and you never see that for Mother's Day. Like,
no.
Yeah, that's actually something that started to change, and in a couple at the end of the summer we'll be doing another report. But last year Our Whiskey released a report on what social media representation was like of women in whiskey brands advertising. So we took 150 whiskey brands on Instagram and we looked at all of their posts over 5 years and looked at how women and people of colour were being represented by those brands. We also counted how many posts talk about Father's Day and Mother's Day, and there was a significant difference. Hardly any brands was posting about Mother's Day, but it is starting to improve. It has become more of a prominent occasion, because when you think about it, 80% of household purchases are made by women. So why would you not market to women in your advertising and on social media? It doesn't make any sense that you would exclude them and exclude whiskey as being a drink that, oh gosh, women can actually drink and enjoy.
Yeah, but then that's
I drink more whiskey than all the men in my family.
Yeah, and also, Becky, that is a bit different because it's about sales, isn't it? It's about money, and it's always different. People are always going to jump on bandwagons for that, aren't they? So this is quite an interesting thing to bring up, though.
It is, but when you think about like how much social media post costs, if you're putting something out on Instagram, it shows it's less about the money, it's more about the effort that's put behind these things. You're not even, it costs nothing to put a picture up just saying Happy Mother's Day. Why not buy her a whiskey? Buy her our bottle of whiskey. That costs absolutely nothing. It's the effort. And I suppose it also comes down to the visibility of female whiskey drinkers as well. So even looking at consumers, how many women are actually purchasing whiskey, and we've already seen that grow by, I think the latest report was 15% over the last 10 years in the UK alone, and that's growing year on year. So why would you not, especially when it doesn't cost you anything?
Exactly.
And I think it's, Becky, you touched on the point, what are people doing to make these changes? And like I said in the introduction, we can all talk about it, but it's like, well, what changes are being done? And I've got a very kind of strong opinion about, there's only so much as women we can do. For me, I feel that, it's amazing. There's so many platforms that support women, and we'll talk a little bit about the different platforms available a bit later. There's so many amazing women supporting each other, everything from social media posts to panels. There's lots of discussions around International Women's Day, and a lot of women get up and say, well, this is what we can do. But for me, the most sort of interesting thing is what men are doing for the industry. And I think to break through that glass ceiling, to get that seat at the table, we need, and it's not about bashing men at all. This is nothing to do with this, but it's about, you know, working with men and men working with us to give us that metaphorical seat at the table. And I don't think until that happens at a greater level, nothing is going to change. So just really to ask, you know, what I'd love to hear from you guys, just are there any men out there doing great things to support women? And if there's not, in your opinions, what do you think men can be doing to support women? And this could be everything from hiring practices to brand awareness to bartending, to any element of this. I mean, Holly, we can start with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, well, for starters, I really hope, I don't know if we can get the statistics on this, I really hope that more men than women watch this. I actually think that this panel will be more beneficial to men.
Absolutely.
A lot, you know, I have, like all of us, we all have good male friends, and, you know, my husband as well. And I think that it's not our job necessarily to teach men, but what we don't realize is, going back to what I said earlier about the conditioning that we've all grown up with, right? And men are also conditioned, and they need to learn to uncondition themselves as much as we do too. And, you know, obviously it goes back to parenting and stuff, but you know, when I tell men stories that have happened to me when I've been bartending, or how I've been undermined as a woman, or perhaps how I feel about imposter syndrome, sometimes they're shocked. And it's not, yes, it is ignorance, but it's not an ignorance that I hold against them. You know, it's an ignorance because they've not had to deal with that in their life. And, you know, someone, again, going back to what I said earlier, this is why this context makes sense, that someone like me who didn't realize that gender inequality was a thing, you know, because I just sort of was like going through life not really paying attention or whatever, like, you know, it's the same for them, and no one knows unless we tell them. And it is boring and it's tedious, and I'm very, very sick of telling people, why aren't there, you know, why isn't there this on your judging panel or that, and blah blah blah. I'm sure there's people who are going to question why we're just a bunch of women on a panel about gender equality. But, you know, that's once gender equality is normalized, then you can start arguing with that. But anyway, my point is that I really think that we just need men to listen. You know, when we say that we feel uncomfortable or we don't feel that we're represented enough, we're not just complaining or whinging like they've been conditioned to think that we are. Like, we're genuinely saying it for a reason, and we want this representation, you know. So yeah, just, and I think that, again, it's a difficult one, you know, like I said, not wanting to teach people, but unfortunately we're going to have to start somewhere, you know. So point out wrongdoing, point out misrepresentation or underrepresentation, you know, because half the time when I do that, say for example, a judging panel or something, I go, hey guys, or a guest bartending shift, because I don't know about you guys, but I found that you know, everyone's getting together and doing guest bartending shifts again. It seems like we've forgotten about girls again and stopped putting girls, like all these like events that I've seen have just been like boys clubs again. And I think it feels like the pandemic has put us back a little bit in that sense. So yeah, we just need to start being that person who goes, hey guys, why aren't there any girls or women, you know, women on your guest bartending shift or judging panel or blah, blah, blah. So yeah, we've still got to bang the drum.
Yeah, I think you're right, Holly. I think that a lot of men, it's not that they're doing these things purposely. Some are, of course, but most of them don't actually realize. And I think that you're so right that it is high time that we've started speaking about it, because for a long time we all just kind of put up and shut up, you know, but now we're actually vocalizing, and now that we are talking, I think that people do appreciate a lot of the things that we go through and how much harder we do have to fight to be at the table and to be heard. And also we also can blame ourselves for this imposter syndrome. I suffer from it immensely, and I'm always sort of not putting myself down, but it's like, well, I don't know why I've got this, or I don't know why people have voted for me. Men wouldn't do that, you know. And actually it was Jacob Bryars, he said it to me. It's like, Sandrae, just appreciate that these happen because of you. It's not because of anything else. And that imposter syndrome, I think we do suffer from. And I think that it's about time that we all did sort of big ourselves up and actually bring each other with us, support each other, which we all do, which is quite amazing, actually. So,
yeah.
Well, it's like Becky said, you know, like you constantly, I think the imposter syndrome goes back to like, you know, having to justify, like, why should Becky have to justify that she is more qualified than, you know, XYZ bloke in whiskey, you know, and that's what a lot of it stems from, is just like, because people have made us justify ourselves, you know.
It's funny you say that, actually, Holly, because I am still to this day the only journalist in the world with a GCD, the only whiskey journalist in the world with a GCD, because when I first became a specifically whiskey journalist, I thought, oh, I need to show that I know what I'm doing, so I need to go and get that. Now, there are very few female whiskey journalists, full stop, but no one else has thought, oh yeah, I need to get a GCD, because that's a general certificate in distillation from the Institute of Brewing and Distilling, because they thought, oh, I need to prove myself. It's only something that I felt that I had to do. And still, even to this day, I think it was last year, I judged a whiskey competition, and I was asked by a male distiller on my panel, do you even like whiskey? And that was only last year in person by a male distiller. But I want to come back to Holly's point about panels and how frustrating it is to see panels all look the same. And something that I think everybody is guilty of, and there's no shame in this because it's human nature, but something we are all guilty of is when we're putting together, say, a panel, or we're putting together, you know, I want to go to the pub, who shall I invite? I'm going to have a party, who shall I have along? We just think of the same people around us. It's the first names that come to mind. That's why when you see those top 10 women in drinks, it's always the same women, because it's always the same names that come to mind. So when we talk about panel discussions, whenever the person who's putting that panel discussion together, they might think, these are the people that first came to mind. Now, if it's a guy, particularly if it's a white guy, they're probably only going to think of other people that look like them, because as humans, that's what we tend to do. We tend to surround ourselves with others who reflect our same values and who look exactly the same as us as well. So it's only natural to want to create a panel that looks like us. Now, that's where change can happen, is when you stop and you think, okay, maybe I should be thinking more about something like we call cognitive diversity. So rather than looking at, well, we need to tick the gender box, we need to tick the race box, think about, well, what about the cognitive diversity? So people's backgrounds and their experiences, what can others bring to the table? Literally, what other experiences or viewpoints can other people bring? Who hasn't had a chance to make their voice heard? Who has an interesting story to tell, who maybe hasn't been seen, doesn't normally get a seat at the table? And that's where we start to see more diversity. And you'll find naturally we see more women and more people of colour being invited into these panels. It's very easy to just fill up that room with the same people, just your mates, just, oh, well, these are the first people I thought of. Take a step back, take a moment and have a think about the many people who could be invited. I once, actually, again, the same competition, same spirits competition last year that I judged. I judged the whiskey panel, and in the room there was just me and one other woman for 2 days, 2 different days. The rest of the room was full of men. And when I asked why were there no more women, they said, oh, we couldn't think of anybody. So I made a list of about 50 women within the UK who could potentially have judged that competition and sent it over. And do you know what happened in this year?
I've done that.
Nothing changed. They just didn't reach out.
Nothing changed.
Nothing changed. It was exactly the same number of women.
So I made a list called Asia Women in Booze.
We have to go beyond. So you have to do the work. And that goes for all of us, men and women. We all have to do the work. So whatever it is that you're doing and putting a panel together. And on the subject of panels, because I thought this one is something worth speaking about as well. Another thing we can be doing is, I think it's only fair that people who put in the same amount of work, the same kind of work, get paid the same rate. So I would like to advocate for fee transparency on panel discussions, and ask, whenever I am invited to do any sort of filming or any roundtable discussion, I always say to the organizer, this is my fee, but I expect to be paid the same as everybody else. So alter that how you will, just make sure that everybody is paid the same, because we're all doing the same work. And that ensures that other women get paid more, and it ensures that, you know, everybody is on the same footing. I was told very recently by a guy in our industry that some people have more experience than others, so they deserve to be paid a lot more, which I thought was interesting, but not for the same work. You're all doing the same thing.
Yeah, it's not Hollywood. Do you know what I mean? It's not like you Brad Pitt and a Z-list, you know, or whatever. It's like you're all, whether you're like going back to what you said, Becky, it's like you need that diversity of the cognitive diversity, right? So someone who maybe is not as experienced as you, let's say perhaps another young female whiskey journalist, but you know, she's just starting out, so she might see things different to you. So she's still putting in just as much opinion and work, just because she hasn't been doing it as long, you know, or he or whoever. Yeah, it's not Hollywood. I think that's what we need to start telling people. It's not like, hey bro, you're not like Brad Pitt and I'm Benicio del Toro or something, you know, that I don't know why they came to my head. But.
Exactly. it was actually a man that helped me raise my fee. When I went freelance, I was charging pittance because I had no idea where to market my day rate. And it was actually the wonderful Charlie McLean who, through his honesty and humbleness, and he is the most amazing, lovely man, told me exactly what he earned, what he thought everybody else was earning, and said, you know, you go away and you decide what you want to earn. And it was only because of that transparency that I then managed to set my day rate, which I can then pass on to other women in the industry who are coming up as well. That's one way that we achieve gender equality, is by having these open conversations about pay.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. You know, I get asked all the time, what should I charge this brand? And I think kind of that fee transparency. And one woman in the industry who is amazing at this is Natalie Campbell, who is the co-CEO of Blue Water. And she really started this process for me. As she said, she's very open. I've done lots of panels with her. She goes, this is what I earn. And she cuts through everything. And I think, you know, more people need to do this, because the gender pay gap still does exist. One bar that really raised the awareness of this was Dante, and they did this campaign, and every time a man asked for the bill, they would add on, I think it was like 17% or something, which is the gender pay gap, I believe, in the States. And it was obviously that people didn't have to pay that, but it was just to raise awareness of that, which I thought was really, really smart, really clever, a little bit tongue in cheek. So I think all of these things are going to add up. And I would say the big message I think that we're all trying to give is, don't be afraid to make mistakes, because if you don't try, we're going to end up either staying the same or worse, going backwards. Like all of us are going to make mistakes. We all have to, I say, be more open and take the risk to make the changes. And you know, this is a very traditional industry. You know, we look at the history of drinks, we look at the history of hotels and bars and cocktails, and whilst tradition is great, we can't allow it to hold us back from making the next change. And it's going to take voices, you know, people like yourselves, other people in this industry, to speak out and make a difference. So also just kind of, I think it links quite nicely, you know, we all talk about this, we all, you know, in the workplace, you know, gender equality, I think, is really important. Like you said, having people from different backgrounds, having people from different parts of the world, I think all contributes to having a more inclusive workplace. But what can we do from a practical level? How can we make these workplaces more exclusive and grow and develop women and, you know, attract new people? You know, what is it, Sandrae, maybe you can start with this. What can we do to put in best practices, and why is it so important for gender equality to happen in the workplace?
Yeah, well, gender equality and actually general inclusion altogether. I'm, in case you haven't noticed, a Black female, so I've got a double thing that I'm fighting against. But for me, I guess it's hasn't been as bad because I've created my own business. So in a way, I'm not always fully aware of what it is like in this industry. I can talk about what it was like in other industries when I came from fashion or from different styles of writing. I must say I did come up against the racism thing a little bit, and also being female. Fashion wasn't so bad because it was dominated by females, but other industries are much more male focused, and definitely I've always been pretty much the only person of color in the room or in the industry that I'm working in. For me, it's not so bad because I don't see my color, but once I stop and realize about it and I see that I am the only person, I do ask myself the question, why are there not as many people of color in the room? And also, why are there not as many women in the room? And, you know, often the question that I'll ask is, do we hold ourselves back or are we being held back? And actually, it's a bit of both, because sometimes people of color, I won't say just Black people, because it's not Black people, it's Asians, it's mixed race, there's all sorts of things. But sometimes because they don't see themselves in these setups, they don't think that it's actually a place for them to work. They're not necessarily aware of all the opportunities there are. You know, it's not just about being in media. As Becky was saying, you can go into distilling, you can go into all different things. And actually, speaking as being here in the UK, there are a lot of opportunities. And for women, in a way, if you want to get into this industry, you can rise pretty damn quickly because there are so few of us. And if you're good at what you do, there is scope, I think, you know, from where I'm standing, there is scope to rise quite quickly. But again, it attracts a certain type of person. So all of us, we're pretty outspoken, we're confident in ourselves, whether we have imposter syndrome or not. Internally, we believe that we're doing a valuable job and we've got a good input. There's a lot of people, there's certain women, as I say, that I think this industry attracts, but we want to attract other people as well, because there's so many different variations and different things that you can do and places that you can fill. As Becky was saying, we do need diversity and inclusion in every single aspect of this industry. So what it's about is just being more visible, I guess. I mean, things like our Whiskey Foundation and Equal Measures, I think these kind of places are doing really a good job at letting people know that there are things out there, mentorships, you know, visibility and inclusion. These are the things that we need to do. I personally would love to go into schools and talk to people and let them know that these jobs exist, and being in the alcohol industry or hospitality in general, it's not a menial industry. It's a really good, rapidly rising industry. So that's where I'm coming from. I think it's education.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's
Can
great.
I just, on something you said there, something that I find interesting is we also have to be wary, and this isn't just for women, this counts for men as well, but I think specifically for women at the moment is that there is a lot of people that I'm noticing, not a lot, like a handful of people that are just riding on the fact that they're a woman and don't really have much talent, and, you know, are taking, and I think this is where we got to strike that balance. They're taking advantage of the fact that they're a woman, or, you know, perhaps they represent another niche, but they're actually not bringing value, or you know, they're not doing work, or, you know, they're being flown around the world and, you know, whatever, and just riding off the fact that they're a woman as well. And like those people are equally as bad, because as much as, yes, they're being a woman and they're representing, you know, females or whatever, it's usually people like influencers and stuff like that. You know, they're going to walk away from, you'd say they get invited on a trip or whatever, and they've not added any value to this trip, and it's just going to put people off, like, oh, this person's a freeloader, or da 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 da. So we got to be careful for you know, those kind of women as well. And then on the other hand, there's the gatekeepers as well, which sounded very gatekeeper of me to say that, but no, there are other women who want to be the only woman in the room, you know. And you know, just for context to our listeners, I was speaking with these awesome women earlier, and you know, I've been very fortunate that they've become really good friends over the last like couple of years, probably because we were the only women in the room and we all sort of, you know, we got that in common. But there are, you know, I know that we all want each other to succeed and we want everyone listening to succeed, but there's also gatekeepers that you have to be mindful of, you know. Like, interestingly, you said there, Sandrae, about when you used to work in fashion, you said because it was all women, it was okay. But I remember when I first started out in journalism, my publisher, the first magazine I started out at, was just awful. Like, she would put women down more than men.
Yeah, they do.
She would sexualize us. You know, and that was bizarre as well. I was just like, oh, I'm not used to dealing with this from a woman.
What I meant was there were more women in the industry, but actually it was a bitchier and much harder industry than this is, for sure. That's a whole different seminar.
I remember being very young and starting out as a young journalist in the drinks industry and writing for one publication, and on my first week I was marched out of the office by a woman who was senior to me and told in no uncertain terms that she was the queen bee and I better watch my step. And I thought, my goodness, I'm about 15 years younger than you and it's my first week. I mean, what have I done? But you know, that kind of thing just made me go, okay. And it did make me feel insecure, and luckily I managed to go overcome that. But what you were saying, Holly, about women using their gender to get ahead, I think is an interesting one, and something that I'm afraid of being seen as that. And I think any person who is marginalized in an industry, and particularly Sandrae, I know we've had conversations about this before, because being a Black woman, you are, particularly in the UK, one of the only Black women at least drinks writers anyway. So obviously brands and events obviously will come to you to speak. You know what you're doing, you know what you're talking about, of course, but you're there for representation. And it's very important that you're there for representation, for visibility, for other young Black women who are maybe coming through, who are looking at the industry for a career. But I think what's also something that brands need to bear in mind, and also any other type of organization, is it's all very well talking about your all-female distilling team or your all-female bar team, but make sure you're actually supporting those women within your organization, and also make sure that you're making them visible within your communications in a meaningful way, rather than wheeling them out on International Women's Day or an Instagram post, for instance. So on the flip side, it's try not to use the women who are within your teams to make your business more successful. That's not what women are there for. I mean, obviously we're there to make all businesses successful, but we are not there to be wheeled out at your whim. We're not there to be just used. We want to be visible. We want to be more, we want to be seen. Like everybody does, everyone wants to be seen, but don't use us. Don't use us.
Interestingly, Becky, like what you said there, and like, you know, Sandrae, going back to what you said about wanting to inspire other people, is like, sometimes I think, exactly right, Becky, like we want to be seen, and we work, you know, we work not just for ourselves, but I actually think that, like, something I just realized listening to you both speak then is like, I actually think a lot of the stuff that we do is, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, I think we do it consciously, but more subconsciously than we realize, is we're paving the way for other people. So like, back to what you said, Becky, that you were like 15 years younger than this other woman and she was intimidated. She should, you know, she should feel like an idiot. She should be like, you know, empowering you and thinking this is the next generation. And like, that's what we're doing, is like, I feel that we are the first, whether you want to say generation or, you know, whatever, like we are paving the way for the ones after us. Like, it's the young girls that I always make sure that I look out for the most, you know, and make sure that they're championed. Because as much as, like, you know, again, I keep backtracking, but back to when you were saying, Becky, about picking panels and who you know around you. Again, it's like, whether it's women or women of color or whatever, it does tend to be a lot of the same people that are picked on for panels or judging and stuff like that. So I always try and make sure that when I do spotlight someone, you know, it's like Sandrae actually recently asked me for cocktail lovers to spotlight someone, and it's like a girl, you know, she's 22 and she's an amazing bartender, rather than just someone like we've all heard of before. You know, these are the ones that are going to be on the panels in the future, so let's give them their spotlight and get them there, you know.
Yeah, very much so. And I think kind of it's all of these little things that make a difference. And I think people's verbiage as well is very, I mean, you guys have all experienced it when people have put, oh, you know, female bar manager or female bartender or female whiskey expert. And you just need to think, you know, and I know that people sometimes don't think, or they don't realize, but you would never say male bartender or male boss or male whiskey expert, because it just sounds ridiculous. It's equally ridiculous that it gets put in front of when you're a woman. So that's one really, really small change that I think in the workplace that also sort of needs to change. And it's these small differences that will make a big difference overall. And you've all touched on, you know, there's various great sort of support networks that are out there. So really kind of wanted just to kind of focus on some of them. You know, we've got things like Our Whiskey Foundation that Becky runs. We've got Speed Rack as well. I also have Celebrate Her, which was set up very sort of organically and was very much about, you know, let's do, you know, go back to the guest bar shifts, you know, very, very male dominated. And it was like, well, we can get some amazing women from around the world. Why don't we just do an event? And actually, this was the start of something that we didn't really expect. And this was back in 2019. And we invited women from all over the world to do a big event at the Artesian. And the support and the, I guess, impact that we were able to have was something that we didn't expect. It wasn't just the positive response from women, but also from men going, well, what can we do? It opened up this conversation. And it was really, really unexpected. I mean, it was a great night and a great party, but it kind of started something a little bit more meaningful. And through that, you know, we go into different, you know, markets. We take women from all over around the world, like, you know, like you said, maybe some bigger names, some names not so well known, and just build this community. And the knock-on effect of this is amazing. You know, we're at the point where we're turning Celebrate Her into a charitable status to raise funds to give out grants for women in the industry. And it's a process. Look, don't get me wrong, it's ongoing, as you know, Becky, you know full well, and you're many steps ahead of us with this. But it's about how can we contribute in a small way. So just to start, obviously, Becky, I'd love to obviously hear more about what you've done with Our Whiskey Foundation and the positive effect that you've been able to have on people within that niche.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, Anna, amazing work with Celebrate Her so far. I think what you are doing is incredible, really shining a spotlight on women and those underrepresented voices too. And it is no easy feat to get charitable status. I have not gone for charity yet. I've gone for the non-profit route, but you never say never. So Our Whiskey, for those who aren't aware of what it is, it started out as a social media movement in 2018 because I, along with my co-founder at the time, Georgie Bell, we noticed that there was a significant lack of diversity within whiskey brands marketing and communications, and which we felt was resulting in constant questions directed at women, such as, do you even like whiskey? And people not really respecting our authority. You can't say that with a straight face anymore, can you? Thanks, South Park. But so it started in 2018 as a social media movement, and then earlier this year, I on my own now have transformed it into something which I hope will be a bit more meaningful. So our whiskey itself is focused at helping consumers explore whiskey and understand it through a subscription pack, which we send out on a monthly basis. But we promise diversity of liquid and diversity of speakers as well. So we really champion the people behind the whiskey. And I'm committed to making sure that there's an equal number of men and women being represented in all of our live tastings that we do, any events that we put on, just trying to make whiskey feel more inclusive and accessible for as many people as possible. And then on the trade side, the Our Whiskey Foundation launched as well at the same time. So in March this year, International Women's Day is our anniversary. And the foundation is really, so it's a non-profit organisation to help recognise, support and empower women in the global whiskey industry. So we are working with brands all around the world. So our brand partners are helping to fund the organisation. And as part of some of our work, we're putting on mentorship. So we've just had our first intake of 40 women that we're putting through a mentorship program. And I know Sandrae is one of our mentors. Thank you very much. We don't just have female mentors, we have female and male mentors from all over the world, working in different capacities. So distilling, blending, writing, marketing, brand ambassadors, you name it. And everyone has been so generous with their time to help. Again, women from everywhere. We have women from Canada, the UK, India, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, all participating in our program to help them reach their career goals. We'll also be very soon launching a fund for qualifications as well, so people will be able to sign up, and we'll be working with the mixing class and the amazing Hannah Lumfair to deliver those qualifications too. And down the line, we'll be having some awards as well, because we really feel that women, particularly in the whiskey industry, are very underrepresented when it comes to awards. And as I said at the very beginning, there are so many women working in our industry, yet all of the awards are really just aimed at men, and you only really see the same older white man inducted into like the halls of fame, for instance. So it's something that I'm really passionate about, is really recognising those women. And hopefully, you know, if the Our Whiskey Foundation's awards can put these women on the map and in the minds of everybody out there, then perhaps the next time somebody goes to put a panel together, they think, oh, she won an award, maybe let's get her on the panel, or maybe she's then put forward for another award somewhere down the line too. So it's all about visibility, it's all about recognition and just supporting women. And we'll have a whole load of seminars as well, so focusing on core skills, and I want to do things on like how to present, how to be more confident, how to battle that imposter syndrome as well. So
and I joined that one.
Me too.
Or happy presenting it, I think. But if anyone's interested, then head to ourwhiskeyfoundation.org, and there's loads of information there, and you can sign up for our newsletter as well.
Amazing. No, I mean, that sounds great, and congratulations on that. I think it's, I mean, the positive response that you've had has been incredible. And I know that there's other things happening. I know, Holly, you've been very much involved in Speed Rack in Asia as well. So it'd be great to hear a little bit more about the positive impact that that's had on the industry.
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar with Speed Rack, it's an all-female speed bartending competition that raises money for breast cancer charity. And it originated in the US, I believe, well, what are they on, 11, 12 years now? Yeah. And I was very keen to bring it to Asia. And we brought it to Hong Kong with finalists. So that it was a final in Hong Kong, and we had finalists from all over Asia. So Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, China, all over. And I knew, of course, I knew it was important. Doing things for charity is important. Doing things that gives women visibility is important. But what I think was one of the most important things is a lot of these women, you know, they were all up and coming younger bartenders, and it was a really good way for them to connect and feel part of a network as well. You know, a lot of them hadn't met each other, or perhaps had, you know, maybe seen each other on social media or whatever. And it was really important for them to come together and connect. And, you know, and especially it was really inspiring for them to meet Lynette and Ivy, who are the founders of Speed Rack. But what was also important was seeing how men supported them. And, you know, traditionally, not always, but traditionally men are the barbacks in Speed Rack. And, you know, seeing these guys come out and support the women and cheer them on and like downright get aggressive, you know, when their girls got to the final and being like, ah, was like really something to behold. And like I said, I always knew it was really important, but just being a part of it was really awe-inspiring. And I think that, you know, there's always some idiot, usually a man, who will be, well, why don't we have one for men? And I said, well, most of the fucking
all of them are,
you guys, you
exactly.
know, yeah. And this one, you know, like we were saying, you need to create, if you create something for women, it's going to attract women. You know, a lot of these competitions, women just don't feel like entering because of imposter syndrome or things like that. So creating a space just for women, I think, is really important.
We also
and also showcasing that women are really fast, dope bartenders.
Absolutely, and we had it in the UK, and I must say I judged on the 2 or 3 that they had, and it was so empowering seeing these wonderful women. All of them were great bartenders that had never actually entered competitions before. Maybe they felt intimidated by guys, maybe they didn't think that it was the right place for them, but to see them actually take the stage and grow in confidence. And actually we have bartenders like Chelsea Bailey, there was Kelsey Ramage was actually one of them, and it's just seeing them rise through the ranks after Speed Rack. So yeah, huge kudos to Lynette and Ivy for bringing that to the fore.
No, absolutely. And just, you know, we've had an amazing hour of talking and hearing all of your thoughts. Obviously, very, very grateful to all of the panelists here for being part of this and being part of hopefully what will be, you know, the start of a revolution, and we can continue to make changes and have an impact every day. So just one final question, very almost like a quick fire question, just to leave it. If you could say one message to people wanting to be part of this change and make the change, what would it be? Becky, I'll go to you first. Just a couple of words.
I think the most important thing to make change, a couple of things, and I'll be very quick. One is to listen, use your ears. You've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, so use them in that order. And don't necessarily assume that because you haven't witnessed any sexism or racism that it doesn't exist. Listen to others when they have stories. The other thing I would suggest is to check your unconscious bias, and we all suffer from that. I suffer from it. I know I can speak for these other women. I know everybody suffers from it. When you think something which is like, oh, am I biased in my opinion or my thoughts? Just check it. Ask yourself why before you say or you do anything. And just think about everybody else around you. And if there's one thing that I will leave you with, because I have a stack of books here to recommend, I would recommend everyone goes away and has a read of this. It's The Authority Gap by Marianne Seacart. And it has got loads of really good positive steps that you can take at the back here to make the world a more equitable place.
Amazing. Thank you, Becky. And Sandra, any final words?
Well, everything that Becky said, actually. And also as women, lift as you climb. So don't forget people as you're coming up, support each other, and try and, even if you're not an official mentor, try and be a mentor to somebody. There's always information that you can pass on, and that's how everything will get better.
Amazing. Thank you, Sandra. Very true.
I was pretty much going to say the same thing, like, you know, hold the hands of others as you ascend, and surround yourself as I have with wonderful women like these. And you can always learn. You know, people might think that we're all top of our game or not, but, you know, I have so much respect for women like you, and I still have lots to learn. And I still have lots to learn from, you know, my young friend that I was talking about, the 22-year-old bartender. You can always learn from everyone. So yeah, just listen. Like Becky said, yeah, it's really hard being the last one because you guys have good stuff.
Well, I still have to go. Don't worry, I'll be.
Oh yes, of course, Anna's got to.
I think everyone's said amazing words. I think what we said before, don't be afraid to speak out. You know, change only happens when you take that risk. So I hope that everybody will take a risk and will, you know, take something away from this seminar about the importance of gender equality in the hospitality industry, whether that applies to brands, bars, hotels, events, tourism. This industry is so vast. It's a very, very special place. Very grateful for this opportunity. So thank you so much to Tales of the Cocktail. Thank you so much to the amazing panelists today, Holly, Becky and Sandra, and hopefully look forward to speaking with many more of you in the industry as well.
Thank you, Anna.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, everyone.